Hello and welcome to my careful ramble. I'm Reed Riggs. I want to talk about Chinese being a non-cognate language with English, what that means, and what ends up kind of being similar after the beginning anyways with learning any language. So Chinese is often talked about, I guess, among students and also parents now and colleagues and teachers, really everyone I've ever encountered. I don't want to say everyone, I want to say everywhere I've ever been has had people who will say, oh, Chinese, that must be really hard. Talking to the learning support recently at my school, one of the people there was saying, oh, well, Mandarin, I'm sure it's got to be a lot harder than the other languages. I want to say where that's true and where it's not true. So, and this isn't about grammar. I do think in terms of grammar, in terms of word endings, Mandarin is just so much easier than Spanish and French. We don't have any of that. We have very little. We have hua, which means like ize to something eyes, something. We have de, which kind of to modify things, possessive or put it on things, sort of mark a kind of like an adjective. There's not much, but that not much is also something that makes it really hard to start with, which is where you don't have words that historically are shared with English. And so English grew out of a kind of pidgin, not a pidgin, but just a lot of borrowing, some kind of old Germanic speakers borrowing a lot of French words. And then that kind of went through Middle English and then Modern English. And it's always been changing. But then it was the French that, historically brought all that Latin, those Latin words. And then the German took a lot of, I think, Greek words through it. So English is just full of all these words historically from different languages. And then there's also borrowings. The Chinese also has borrowings from Japanese and from other foreign words. And as a beginning language class, we can use a lot of those. Hanbao bao is hamburger. Shala is salad. Shafa is a sofa. So we can use those as teachers to get beginners going. And then the question is, but after that, then you've got no cognates and no cognates in very few loanwords. And it's very hard to find a verb that is a cognate or loanword. I would say no cognates. Cognate, it means it was historically derived. It came through a historical root. So the English word hammer, we have that because the German word hammer was the German word for hammer when English was first getting its roots started, and we still have hammer today. Those are cognates. Loanwords are just taken at any other point in time from other languages, just borrowed in from another language from the outside. So I would say Chinese has zero, not to my knowledge, no cognate English words. We have some borrowed words, but I would say none of those are verbs. Someone told me one recently that was sort of a modern kind of slang word, and I can't remember what it was. Anyways, those are so rare. That makes it hard because verbs tie a lot to how a sentence is structured. And so if we can say that, I can't think of a French one right now. I've been studying French for the last 2-ish years. But if every word is new, it's just a lot more learning to do, and it's a lot less to connect with. And so, when we see a French word like femme, we can think of feminine. When we see a French word like chat, C-H-A-T, and we're told that that's a cat, we say, oh, it's a cat with an extra H. There's a lot of similarity between French and English because English came through French. But the other Latin-derived languages also have a lot shared. My wife and I went and visited Norway, and there were a lot of words also through Norwegian's language history that are similar with English. I don't know which ones were borrowed recently and which ones were historically derived, cognates. But I knew that I recognized a lot of words. I was able to connect and kind of guess a lot, even if they were so-called false friends. False friends are words that look like the word from the other language. They just have a completely different meaning. That should be expected because even in one language, like even in just in English, pop open a dictionary to any random page, you'll see most words have multiple senses of meaning. So it makes sense that another language wouldn't exactly have the same senses of meaning that a particular word form has in English. It's historically kind of arbitrary which choices people made to borrow words to fit different meanings. And that's what we have today as what we call a language or vocabulary. So, so it does make it hard to start in, and it makes it a little hard to continue because you're just constantly seeing new words. And that gets me to my second point, which is you're actually not constantly seeing new words because language usage constantly recycles the same words over and over. Language teaching, unfortunately, typically isolates words into new lists. And so that's where I think we should fix our traditional mindset and say, okay, instead of saying, let me doctor up a text or even find an authentic text, but just create a list of the vocabulary that should be new to you, because you should still have memory for every word that we've studied before. And these are just the new words in the list. The simple fix that I've found is to remember my experience where not every word is on the front of my mind all the time. Like I don't have perfect memory for every word I've ever studied. Some of them I didn't have enough exposure to, and so I barely remember them. Some of them I feel like I've forgotten. Maybe I truly have forgotten. I don't know. And some of them I did know at some point in time. Maybe I even knew them recently, and I'm just forgetting for whatever reason right now. Okay, so the really easy fix is to just have a vocab list that has every word in the text. And I do this through a corpus tool online. I can put a link in the description. But I just I copy the entire text. I put it into the box. I select for vocabulary, and it makes a whole list. I copy that whole list. I put it into this spreadsheet that I just always have around for kind of note. It's kind of a scratch pad. I have a little bookmark for it, so I just go into my kind of scratch pad spreadsheet, paste it in, copy and paste the list into Google Translate to get a quick list opinion, paste that back into the spreadsheet next to the vocab, go back into Google Translate, copy all the English. But then what I do is I go through the list and I check what is the sense of meaning for this text. And I go and fix all that. And then I have a vocab list that's every word in. I explain that to my students. This is every word in the vocab list. Now, one of the things that's really nice about that is that, like I did this recently with my 11th graders. No, it was my 10th graders. They're about to go into DP1, the Diploma Program 1. It's a little like a 2-year AP course, but for the IB program. And so junior year and senior year are when they intensively ramp up toward these the IB exams at the end of their senior year. And so my 10th graders, I said, starting next year, we're going to stop doing so much of this creative stuff that we've been having fun doing. We're going to start really hammering through some tough texts. Here's how that works. You get a vocab list for every text, and it contains every word in the order of the text. The frequency list program allows me to choose rank by frequency or rank by order of the text. I just leave it as the default rank by order of the text. Okay, so that's settled. Then, so the students, the fun of it was to show them at the end of it. I said, notice this list has 140 something words total. It's because there's that many unique words in the text. The words don't repeat in the list. So once they've come up in the list, they don't come up again. It means that when it comes up again in the text, if it's not in the list, it means it was somewhere earlier in the list. You have to go back and look for it. I guess that encourages more focused paying attention. I'm not sure. But the fun of it was to say, hey, look at the end of the list. See how many vocab words total there are. It was like 140 something. But just the ones on display on my big screen at that moment, how many do you already recognize? And most of the students said, oh yeah, we already know most of these words. So I was like, cool. So it's a very encouraging list. It provides exactly the kind of reminders that students know. It was encouraging in the sense that they looked at it and said, oh yeah, we know these words. But it's also encouraging because they know what it's connected to. That it's not a list of like, here's new words you're supposed to be memorizing, and that's the focus of this entire unit. We're going to do a bunch of activities that just practice these new words, which is typically how a textbook is organized. Instead, it's, yeah, we know that these are the words. Where do these words come from? They came from that text. We know that they're every word in that text. And by looking at the list, it's very encouraging to say, oh, I know most of these words, so I should be able to read that text. So it points their attention back toward the text, which is a communicative context. Somebody wrote that text with some sort of big message and lots of little details to build up that message. And that's just the meaning of it. And that it helps reinforce a sense of language usage for the students instead of pulling them away and saying, let's memorize this list of vocab, and there's no time for those old lists that you've already studied before, which is typically, again, how textbooks are organized and how a lot of classes that follow textbooks are also organized. As we say, there's no time for that. We have to memorize these new words. So we just constantly keep reinforcing new words. I try to keep everything in a context, but also make sure that I have context that will naturally recycle words that we've used before. One, because that's how normal language usage works. I don't think I've said any words in this recording just now that you have to go check a dictionary to see what they mean. Pretty sure I'm only using words that you already know, and that's not a problem because that's how language is normally used. We are aiming to communicate ideas. We do that by using words that we think the other person already knows. There might be moments where someone's trying to look erudite or super educated or upper class or something, and so they're going to try to use words that confuse the other person. And in that moment, they're not communicating the message that they're saying. Maybe they're communicating the message that they're superior to you, and so that could be that could be a rare instance in which people are trying to use words you don't know, maybe in a debate to try to confuse the other person. So it's possible, but in effective communication, in successful communication, I'm going to stick to words you already know. And so that's what we want with the text. That maybe 2/3 of the text is words the students already know, or more, and then there's some new vocab in there. That new vocab doesn't need to be the thing. Let me make a new video about this, see if I can say this quickly. So thanks for listening. Let's see what happens in the next ramble.